The training facility stood alone on the dead planet HFY. Its metal walls were painted in shades of gray to match the rust-colored sky above. The sun hung in the distance like a cold eye watching everything below. This was the place where the Galactic Coalition sent beings from all across the universe to test whether they could survive the impossible. Teo stood in the main training hall with 63 other trainees. Each one came from a different world and belonged to a different species. There were tall beings with skin that glowed under special lights. There were small creatures that communicated through clicks and hums. There were beings that looked almost human, and others that looked like nothing Teo had ever seen before. But Teo was the only true human in the group, and everyone could tell just by looking at him. His eyes moved across the group. The Qualoxian next to him was almost 2 meters tall, with 6 arms and skin that changed colors based on his feelings. Right now, his skin showed a nervous purple. The insectoid Zortak collective stood in a formation of 7 bodies, all connected through a shared mind that let them think as one. There was a Vrathian with thick scales and a body built for strength. There was even a being made of pure energy held together by special technology, visible only as a glowing outline. Humans did not have special skin. They did not have multiple arms. They could not connect their minds together. They did not have special powers. Teo knew this fact very well, but he was here, just the same. The door to the main hall opened with a sound like thunder. Everyone turned to look. In walked the survival instructor, and the room became quiet in an instant. Her name was Yuki, and she belonged to a species called the Verath. Her body stood almost 3 meters tall, and her skin was made of materials that looked like crystal or glass. When light hit her body, it broke apart into rainbow colors. Her eyes were large and did not have pupils like human eyes. Instead, they looked like deep pools of clear water. When she spoke, her voice traveled through the air with strange harmonics that made even the strongest beings feel small. "Welcome to HFY," Yuki said. Her voice did not need to be loud because the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You are here because the Galactic Coalition believes you might have the skills to survive the most difficult test we can give. You have been chosen from thousands of candidates. You are the best of your species." She walked forward, and her feet made no sound on the metal floor. "But being the best is not enough. Your special skills are not enough. Your strength is not enough. Your intelligence is not enough. Here, on this world, none of those things will save you." Yuki pointed one long finger toward the window. Outside, the landscape of HFY stretched out like a nightmare made real. Nothing grew there. No grass, no trees, no water that looked safe to drink. The ground was covered with strange crystals that glowed with sickly colors. Some were purple, some were green. Some looked like they were made of ice, but the air was hot enough to hurt exposed skin. In the distance, strange rock formations stretched up toward the rust-colored sky like the bones of dead giants. "In 2 weeks, you will be dropped at different locations across this planet," Yuki continued. "Each location is isolated. You will have no communication with the outside world. You will have a single emergency radio that you must not use unless you are dying. The Coalition observers will watch you at all times, but they will not help you. Not for any reason. If you are hungry, no one will bring you food. If you are cold, no one will bring you blankets. If you are afraid, no one will come to comfort you." Teo listened carefully. He had heard stories about the survival training before. Many beings had attempted it. Not all of them had survived. Some had used their emergency radios in the first day. Some had lasted a week before their minds broke under the pressure. Very few had completed the full 2 weeks and walked away with their pride intact. "The biggest danger on HFY is not the temperature or the rocks," Yuki said. "The biggest danger is starvation. This planet has been dead for millions of years. Nothing lives here naturally. Nothing grows here naturally. When I say nothing, I mean exactly that. Nothing. She paused. Her crystal skin reflected the light of the fluorescent panels above. Every being in the room felt the weight of her next words before she even spoke them. Listen very carefully, Yuki said. Nothing here is edible. Every plant you find will poison you. Every organism you find will kill you. Every mineral you dig up will hurt you. The water in some places is safe to drink, but most of it contains chemicals that will destroy your organs. If you eat anything on this planet without my permission, you will die. This is not a threat. This is simple fact. The Quiloxian next to Teo made a small sound of fear. His skin turned a darker shade of purple. Some of the other beings exchanged nervous looks with their neighbors. You have emergency rations that will last 7 days, Yuki continued. During the first week, you will eat these rations slowly to make them last. During the second week, you will have nothing. You will need to find a way to survive without food. Some of you will try to eat things from this planet. Those of you will die. I have seen it happen before. Yuki looked directly at Taiyo for a moment. Her strange eyes locked onto his human eyes. Taiyo did not look away. He did not show fear on his face. He simply looked back at her and listened to every word she said. Your chances of success depend on your species and your preparation, Yuki said. The Vrathians have natural resistance to poisons. They will do well. The insectoid collectives can process materials that are toxic to other beings. They will do well. The energy beings have no need for food at all. They will do well. But some of you... She paused again. She looked around the room at all the beings who did not have natural advantages. Some of you will struggle. Some of you will fail. That is acceptable. Not every being can survive every situation. The Coalition understands this. She walked to the center of the room. You have 1 week to prepare. Learn about your species' abilities. Learn about the equipment you have been given. Learn about the emergency protocols. In 7 days, we will move you to the surface of Kethvor, and then your survival begins. Yuki turned and walked back toward the door. One final thing, she said without turning around. Remember my warning about the food. Nothing here is edible. Nothing. If you forget this warning, you will die. And I do not want to fill out the paperwork for dead trainees. It is very boring. The door closed behind her. For several long moments, no one moved. Then the room exploded into noise. Every being started talking at once. Some spoke in languages that made strange sounds. Some communicated through lights or smells or vibrations. Teo stood quiet, looking out the window at the dead world of Kethvor. 1 week to prepare, then 2 weeks to survive. 2 weeks in a place where nothing could help him. 2 weeks where his human body would be tested against a hostile planet. 2 weeks where the only advantage he had was his mind. Teo smiled a small smile. He had always believed that a human mind was worth more than any natural advantage. Now he would find out if he was right. He had 1 week to prepare, and he had many ideas about what he would do. The small aircraft descended toward the surface of Kethvor, and Teo gripped the edge of his seat. Through the window, he could see the place where he would spend the next 2 weeks alone. It was a canyon surrounded by tall rock walls. Strange purple crystals stuck out from the ground like teeth in a monster's mouth. The sky above was turning orange as the sun moved lower. The aircraft touched down with a gentle bump. The pilot, an alien being with 3 eyes and gray skin, turned to look at Teo. "Good luck, human," the pilot said through the translation device. "I have seen many beings try this test. Few succeed. I hope you are one of the few." Teo picked up his emergency kit and stepped out onto the surface of Kethvor. The air was hot and dry. It tasted like dust when he breathed it in. The canyon walls blocked most of the wind, so the heat pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. He could see the small drones floating high above, watching him. Those drones would record everything he did for the next 2 weeks. The Coalition observers would watch every moment of his survival attempt. The aircraft lifted back into the sky and disappeared over the canyon wall. Teo was alone. He checked his equipment. He had a water purifier that could clean most water sources. He had a knife and some basic tools. He had a small container of emergency food rations that would last 7 days if he was careful. He had a metal container where he could make fire. He had rope and cloth and other supplies. And he had his emergency radio, sealed in a box that could only be opened if he decided to give up. Teo spent the first day exploring his canyon home. He walked the length of it, about 2 kilometers. The walls on both sides were at least 50 meters tall. The canyon floor was covered with different types of crystals. Some were sharp and cut his hands when he touched them. Some felt warm to the touch. Some felt cold like ice even though the air was hot. He found 3 places where water came out of the rock wall. He tested each one with his purifier. 2 of them showed dangerous chemicals. One of them was clean enough to drink. He found several types of insects. Some were small and looked like beetles. Some were larger and had long legs like spiders. Some flew through the air with wings that glowed with strange colors. All of them moved around the plants and crystals as if they knew where they were going. That night, Teo sat in his small camp and ate one of his ration bars. It tasted like plastic and chemicals, but it filled his stomach. He watched the stars come out in the rust-colored sky. They were different from the stars he had seen from Earth. Everything about this place was different. He thought about what Yuki had said. Nothing here is edible. Every plant would poison him. Every organism would kill him. But Yuki was speaking from the point of view of beings who ate normal food. She was not thinking like a human. She was not thinking about the thousands of years that humans had spent learning how to make poison into food. On the 3rd day, Teo began his forbidden experiment. He moved his camp to a place away from the small drone's regular flight paths. It was not exactly hidden, but it was out of the way. He started collecting samples of everything around him. He took small pieces of the purple crystals and put them in his metal container. He added water and heated them over a fire made from special stones that burned hot. The crystals began to break down and change color. He let the water cool and tasted a tiny amount. It was bitter and hurt his mouth. He tried boiling it longer. After many attempts, the liquid became less painful to taste. It was not good, but it was becoming less poisonous. He collected insects and studied them carefully. He noticed that certain insects only ate certain types of crystals or plants. This meant that some things were safe for those insects. If he could understand what made them safe, maybe he could make them safe for himself too. He found a type of vine that grew in cracks in the rock. The small beetles seemed to feed on this vine without any problems. Teo took a sample and tried to process it. He dried it in the sun. He ground it into a powder. He boiled it. He fermented it. After several days, he created something that tasted almost like a grain. By the 5th day, Teo had created his first real meal. He took some of the processed crystal liquid and mixed it with boiled insects and the fermented vine powder. He formed it into a small ball and ate it carefully. It tasted horrible. It tasted like dirt and chemicals and things that should not be eaten, but it was nutrition. It stayed in his stomach without making him sick. He had created food from something that was supposed to be completely inedible. For the next 3 days, Teo continued his experiments. He became more skilled at processing the materials. He learned which crystals could be used for minerals. He learned which insects were safe to eat if they were cooked properly. He learned which plants could be fermented to break down their toxic compounds. He did not know if the drones were recording him as a failure or as a success. He did not know if Yuki would see his experiments and disqualify him immediately. But he could not stop. Because with each experiment that succeeded, with each new food discovery, he realized that his theory was correct. Nothing on Kethvor was naturally edible. But edible was not a fixed state. It was a process. It could be created. On the 9th day, Teo had enough food prepared that he could stop eating his emergency rations. He had a full menu of different foods made from the plants and insects and crystals of Kethvor. His strength did not disappear. His mind stayed sharp. He was not just surviving. He was proving something. The drones continued to float above him, watching everything. The coalition observers back at the base would be seeing everything he was doing. They would know that he had broken Yuki's direct rule about not eating anything from the planet. But Teo did not care anymore. He was a human doing what humans had always done. He was taking the impossible and turning it into possibility through knowledge and creativity and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. He looked up at the drones and smiled. Let them watch. Let them record. Let them judge. He was going to survive this planet, and he was going to do it by breaking the rules in a way that could not be punished because he had technically followed them perfectly. Nothing on Kethvor was edible. He had made it edible. There was no rule against that. By the 10th day of his survival test, Teo had built a complete kitchen in his canyon camp. It was not fancy or modern like the kitchens back on Earth or on the coalition stations, but it was functional. He had discovered rocks that could hold heat. He had created cooking vessels from hardened clay that he found near the water sources. He had tools made from sharp stones and pieces of metal from his equipment kit. His daily routine had become almost normal. He would wake before the sun rose. He would check his water supply and start a fire. He would prepare his breakfast by boiling water and mixing in processed insects and fermented plant material. The food was not delicious, but it gave him energy. His body was staying strong. Around midday, he would spend hours experimenting with new recipes. He had learned that some of the bioluminescent creatures that flew through his canyon could be roasted until their glowing parts turned dark. Once they were dark, they became safe to eat. The meat inside was white and could be ground into a powder that tasted almost like grain. He created small cakes from this powder by mixing it with boiled crystal liquid and dried vine pieces. Teo made detailed notes in a small book that he had been given as part of his survival kit. He wrote down exactly what he was doing and what the results were. He drew pictures of each plant and insect. He recorded the temperatures and the times. He wanted to understand the science behind what was happening. He wanted to know why these processing methods worked. One discovery excited him more than all the others. In the rocks near his camp, he found what looked like fossils. They were the remains of plants and creatures from when Kethvor had been alive millions of years ago. These fossils had been turned into stone, but they still contained the chemical structure of what they had once been. When he broke them down and processed them in the same way he processed the modern crystals, they became edible. They provided different nutrients than the modern materials. He realized that Kethvor was giving him the recipe for survival. The planet itself was showing him what to eat. By the 13th day, Teo had created a menu with 5 different types of food. This was more than just survival. This was civilization. This was what humans had built across thousands of years, the ability to take hostile environments and create comfort within them. His breakfast consisted of a broth made from boiled rock cores and crushed insect shells. The broth was hot and contained minerals that his body needed. It tasted like a weak soup, but it filled him and gave him energy to start the day. His midday meal was more interesting. He had developed a technique for roasting the bioluminescent insects. If he roasted them at exactly the right temperature, their outer shells would turn hard and brown. This created a protective layer around the meat inside. The meat stayed soft and tender. He would crush these roasted insects and mix them with processed vine powder. He would form the mixture into small cakes and press them flat. When he cooked these cakes on hot stones, they developed a crispy outside and a soft inside. He called them insect cakes, though he knew that name would never be allowed in a proper restaurant. For his evening meal, he created something more complex. He had learned that the fermented vine material could be layered with other ingredients to create different textures. He would spread a layer of fermented vine paste on a flat stone. He would add a layer of ground beetle carapaces mixed with crystal powder. He would add another layer of roasted and crushed insect meat. Then he would heat it all together until it bonded into one solid piece. When it cooled, it became something that looked almost like bread with different layers. It was not good, but it was better than anything else he had created. For snacks throughout the day, he prepared roasted fungus balls. There was a type of fungus that grew in the shaded areas of the canyon. It was small and purple and would have been instantly poisonous to any being that tried to eat it raw. But Teo had learned that if he boiled it first, then roasted it, then ground it and mixed it with crystal powder, it became something else entirely. The final product was small balls that could be eaten as snacks. They provided energy and helped fill his stomach between meals. Teo realized that he was creating not just food, but culture. He was doing what humans had always done. He was taking raw materials and transforming them through knowledge and creativity into something that could sustain life and bring satisfaction. This was the thing that made humans different. This was the thing that had allowed humans to survive on so many different worlds. Every night, he would eat his meal slowly and carefully. He would chew each bite and taste it completely. He would record in his book what the meal did to his body and how he felt after eating it. By day 15, he had enough data to fill half his notebook. He had created a complete system of food production that kept him healthy and strong. The drones continued to watch him from above. They never interfered. They never tried to stop him. But he knew that every moment was being recorded, every experiment, every success, every small victory. Teo had not just survived on Kethvor, he had thrived. He had done something that the instructor said was impossible. He had turned a dead planet into a place of abundance. Not abundance the way nature created it, but abundance the way humans created it. Through thought and effort and refusal to accept the limits that others tried to place on him. On the evening of day 16, with one day left before his rescue, Teo sat in his canyon and looked at everything he had created. His organized collections of ingredients, his cooking tools arranged by purpose and function, his notes and records and documentation of every process, his meals arranged on display, showing the variety of what he had accomplished. He had come to this planet with nothing but his mind and his determination. Now he had created a full menu of foods that sustained him. He had broken the rule about not eating anything from the planet by following the letter of the law perfectly. He had taken something impossible and made it possible. And somewhere, he thought, the drones were recording all of this. And somewhere, Yuki and the other instructors were watching. And somewhere, the coalition observers were probably arguing about what to do with a human who had done something that was supposed to be impossible. Teo cleaned up his camp and prepared his best meals for the final day. He had come here to survive. He was leaving, having changed what survival meant. The aircraft landed in Teo's canyon on the morning of day 17. But instead of the pilot who had dropped him off, 3 beings stepped out. One of them was Yuki. The other 2 were coalition observers who had traveled down from the main station to see what was happening with the human trainee. Teo was not surprised to see them. He had known for several days that they would come. The drones had to report what they were seeing, and what they were seeing was a human who had done something that broke every rule about Kethvor. He stood and waited for them to walk across the canyon floor toward his camp. Yuki's crystal body reflected the light of the sun. Her steps were silent, even though she was so large. The 2 observers, one a tall Varathian with scales, and one a small being that looked like it was made of purple gas held in a force field, walked behind her. When they reached his camp, they stopped. For a long moment, no one said anything. Teo's workspace was laid out clearly for them to see. On one side, his collections of ingredients were organized carefully. There were containers with different types of processed crystals. There were dried insects arranged by size and type. There were fermented vine materials in sealed containers. There were fossils and minerals and fungus specimens. Everything had labels that Teo had written with a small piece of charcoal. On another side were his tools, stones used for cooking, containers made from hardened clay, a sharp piece of metal that he had shaped into a knife, pieces of cloth that he had used for carrying and storing materials. Everything arranged in the order of how often he used it. And in the center of the camp were his meals. He had prepared his best versions of everything, the insect cakes, the layered dish of fermented vine and crushed shells, the roasted fungus balls, the mineral broth, all of it arranged on flat stones to look as presentable as possible. "Teo," Yuki said. Her voice had the same harmonics as before, but something was different. Something was less certain. "Explain this." Teo took a breath. This was the moment. This was where he could be disqualified, or where he could change everything. "You said that nothing here is edible," Teo began. His voice was calm and clear. "You said it in the training hall and you meant it. You were correct. Nothing on Kethvor is naturally edible for any being that did not evolve on this planet. That statement is true." He gestured toward his meals. "But I did not eat something that was naturally edible. I made something edible. I took materials that were poisonous and dangerous and I transformed them through processing and cooking and fermentation. I did not break your rule. I followed it exactly. You said nothing here is edible. You did not say I could not make things edible." Yuki looked at his workspace. She examined each item carefully. The Vrathian observer was taking readings with a device that he held in his hand. The purple gas being was making soft sounds, like it was communicating with someone far away. "You have violated the spirit of the training," Yuki said. "You were supposed to survive by finding what nature had provided, not by creating your own food sources." "With respect," Teo replied, "I was supposed to survive. I did not read anything about how I was supposed to survive. I was only told to live for 2 weeks on a planet with nothing to eat. I have done that. I have lived. I am healthy. I am strong. My mind is clear." The Vrathian observer approached the meals. He took a small piece of the insect cake and placed it in a device that he carried. The device glowed and made small sounds. After several seconds, he looked up. "The meal is nutritionally complete," he said. "There are no toxic compounds present. The protein content is high. The mineral content is adequate. This would sustain a humanoid body effectively." The purple gas being made more sounds. Yuki listened to what it was saying through a translation device that appeared on her wrist. Her crystal face was hard to read, but Teo thought he saw something that might have been respect in her expression. "The Coalition observers are asking many questions," Yuki said. "They are asking how you discovered these processes. They are asking if you are sure that you have not used any materials from your emergency kit to cook these foods. They are asking if there is any possible way that this is real." "I can answer all of those questions," Teo said. He picked up his notebook. "I have recorded everything, every experiment, every result, every process. I used the fire-making materials from my emergency kit, yes, but I did not use any actual food from my emergency kit. I have not eaten any of my emergency rations since day 9. The food I eat now comes entirely from Kethvor." He showed them his notebook. Pages and pages of careful notes, drawings of each plant and insect, records of temperatures and times, descriptions of what worked and what did not work. The scientific method applied to survival cooking. Yuki studied the notebook. She turned the pages slowly. The observers watched her face, waiting to see what she would say. "This is detailed work," Yuki said finally. "This is the work of someone who understands science and has the patience to learn through repeated experimentation. This is not the work of someone who was just lucky. She looked at Teo directly. When I told you that nothing here was edible, I believed it to be true based on the evolution of most biological species. Most beings cannot break down toxic compounds the way that a human civilization has learned to break them down over thousands of years. Most beings do not have the knowledge of fermentation or distillation or controlled heating that humans have discovered. Most beings accept the world as it is given to them. But humans have always tried to change the world to fit their needs. The Vrathian observer was moving around the camp now, examining everything closely. "This is remarkable," he said. "The processes he has developed are crude, but they are based on sound scientific principles. This is exactly the kind of cognitive adaptation that makes a species capable of surviving in any environment." The purple gas being made a long series of sounds. Yuki listened to the translation. A smile formed on her crystal face. It was hard to see, but it was definitely there. "The Coalition observers have made their decision," Yuki said. "You have passed the survival test. Not only have you survived, but you have demonstrated something that has never been shown before. You have shown that the limitation on this planet was not the planet itself, but the willingness to adapt beyond natural abilities." She looked at the meals again. "In all my years as a survival instructor, I have never seen this. Every other trainee has either survived by using their natural abilities or they have failed. You have survived by refusing to accept that you did not have any natural abilities. You have survived by creating your own abilities." Teo felt something release inside his chest. Relief and satisfaction and a kind of pride that he had never felt before. "You may have one question before we leave," Yuki said. "What is your question?" Teo thought for a moment. Then he asked, "Will you teach the other trainees about these methods?" Yuki looked at the Vrathian observer. They seemed to communicate without words. Then Yuki looked back at Teo. "Yes," she said. "The Coalition will add your methods to the training protocols. Every species will learn what you have learned. Every trainee will be told that limitation is not something that is given to you by the universe. Limitation is something that you accept or reject based on your creativity and your will." The aircraft lifted off an hour later. Teo sat inside it with Yuki and the observers. As they rose above the canyon, he looked down at his camp. The organized workspace, the collections of ingredients, the evidence of human adaptation and creativity. He had come to Kethvor to prove that a human could survive without any natural advantages. But what he had really proved was something deeper. He had proved that humans did not need natural advantages. They had something better. They had the ability to create advantages where none had existed before. The main training facility on Kethvor was in a state of controlled chaos. While Teo had been completing his survival test in the canyon, the other trainees had been struggling with their own challenges. And when the Coalition observers returned with news of what the human had accomplished, every being at the facility wanted to know the details. Yuki stood in the main briefing room with Teo. Behind them was a large screen showing images of his camp, his cooking methods, and his meals. Around the room sat Coalition officials, scientists, and other instructors. They all had questions. "Can you explain your process for making the crystal compound edible?" asked a Vrathian xenobiologist named Dr. Kina. She was younger than most of the other experts in the room. Her scales were bright green, which indicated that she was still in an early stage of her career. But her questions were sharp and showed that she understood what Teo had done. "The crystals contain minerals and compounds that are poisonous in their raw form," Teo explained. "But if you heat them to a high temperature and keep them heated for a long period of time, the toxic compounds break down. They break apart at the molecular level. What is left behind is still crystalline material, but it has different chemical properties. It is no longer poisonous. It becomes a mineral supplement that a body can use." Dr. Kina was writing things down on a device that she held in her hand. "This is a fermentation process, correct?" she asked. "It is similar to fermentation," Teo said, "but not exactly the same. Fermentation usually involves organisms breaking down organic material. What I was doing was using heat energy to break down the chemical bonds in the crystals. It is more like distillation or controlled chemical degradation." A coalition official from the energy-being species asked a different question. "Why did you not simply use your emergency rations for the full 2 weeks? You would have passed the test and avoided all of this risk." Teo looked at the official carefully. "Because I wanted to prove something," he said. "Not just to the coalition, but to myself. I wanted to prove that a human could adapt to any environment. Not by using the equipment that someone gave me, but by using my mind and my knowledge." In another part of the facility, the Quiloxian trainee was being questioned by a medical team. The Quiloxian had used his emergency radio on day 1. He had not been able to handle the isolation and the fear. He had requested extraction immediately, and the coalition had sent a rescue aircraft. Now he was recovering from the stress of his failure. "The human did what?" the Quiloxian asked when one of the medical people told him about Teo's achievement. "The human trainee survived by creating food from inedible materials on the planet's surface," the medical person repeated. The Quiloxian looked confused. His skin turned several different colors in rapid succession, showing his emotional state. "How is that possible?" he asked. "The instructor said that nothing on that planet was edible. Apparently, the human took something that was not edible and made it edible," the medical person explained. "He used cooking and fermentation and other chemical processes. No one had thought to try that approach before." At the coalition station, the insectoid Zortak collective was also hearing the news. They had survived the 2 weeks by entering a controlled hibernation state for the 2nd week. They had used their connection to a shared mind to split the burden of survival among 7 bodies. But when they heard about what Teo had done, they made a decision. "We should learn this process," one of the bodies in the collective said. "This approach could be useful to our species," another body agreed. "We were superior because of our connection," a third body said. "But this human has shown us something. He has shown us that superiority can come from creativity as well as from biology." The Vrathian trainee, who had survived easily by using her natural resistance to poisons, was now looking at Teo's notes with intense focus. She realized that she had been relying on her advantages instead of developing her mind. The human had done the opposite, and the human had achieved something remarkable. Within 2 days, every trainee who wanted to see Teo's methods had the opportunity. Yuki organized a presentation where Teo demonstrated his cooking techniques to everyone who was interested. He showed them how to process crystals. He showed them how to roast insects properly. He showed them the fermentation processes for vine materials. He showed them how to identify edible fossils and extract their nutritional value. Dr. Kina was taking detailed notes and recording everything with devices that captured all of the information. "This will change everything," she said to Teo during a break in the demonstration. "Do you understand how important this is? This is not just about survival. This is about something much bigger." "What do you mean?" Teo asked. "I mean," Dr. Kina said, "that every coalition species has assumed that adaptation means using the skills that they were born with. But you have shown that adaptation can also mean using knowledge and creativity to create new skills. This changes how we think about evolution. This changes how we think about survival. This changes everything." On the final night before all the trainees were transported back to their home worlds, a celebration was held. Food was served in the main hall. The food was real food from across the galaxy, not the rations or processed Kethvor materials. But Teo noticed something. In one corner of the room, several trainees were gathered around a table where Teo had prepared some of his Kethvor meals. The Quiloxian, who had been rescued after just 1 day, was trying an insect cake. His skin showed surprise. "This is actually good," he said. "I mean, it is strange, but it is good. I cannot believe you made this from that terrible planet." The Vrathian was sampling the mineral broth. "The flavor profile is unexpected," she said, "but the nutritional value is impressive, and the creativity in combining multiple materials is remarkable." Teo realized something important in that moment. It was not just about proving that he could survive. It was about showing others that they could do things they thought were impossible. It was about changing what everyone believed was possible. A coalition official approached him as he was watching the other trainees. "The observers want to make you an offer," the official said. "We would like you to join the coalition as an adaptation specialist. You would travel to different planets and study how different species learn to adapt to hostile environments. You would help us develop training programs for species that do not have natural advantages in difficult situations." Teo looked around the room. He looked at Yuki, who gave him a small nod of approval. He looked at Dr. Kina, who was watching him with interest. He looked at the other trainees who were trying his food and learning his techniques. "Yes," Teo said, "I would like to do that." That night, he sent a message back to Earth. He told his family about what he had accomplished. He told them that a human had gone to a dead planet and turned it into a place of abundance through knowledge and creativity. He told them that he was staying with the coalition to help other species learn the same thing. The message would take weeks to reach Earth because of the distance. But when it arrived, Teo knew that it would make people proud. Not because a human had survived something impossible, but because a human had refused to accept that anything was impossible in the first place.